Political Islam and Muslim brotherhoods continue to attract attention across Europe. As debates around migration, social unity, and security grow, questions remain about the influence of this movement and their impact on European society. To discuss these issues, we are pleased to welcome our guest, Mr. Émmanuel today. Mr. Émmanuel, welcome with us. First of all, how would you define political Islam and why is the Muslim Brotherhood considered one of its main movements?
Well, first of all, the political Islam movement is not a new thing. It was created in 1928 in Egypt with Hassan al-Banna, so it is a long-lasting movement. I would define it very simply on two positions. First of all, re-Islamization of society, targeting moreover the popular masses on one side, and Salafization, which is the return to the whole or the core of religion for the political elites. And as it was mentioned, political Islam is also linked to the fact that there is this re-Islamization from the top, from the bottom to the top, from the masses, popular masses on one side, and the political elite, in order to, let's say, sharp or to influence the political system. This is why a certain number of movements linked to political Islam, FIS in Algeria, PGD in Morocco, AKP in Turkey, or Jama Islamiyah in Egypt, or Tawazul in Mauritania, have a ambition to target the civil servants in order to have political Islam inside the states and to forge and to influence from inside the political decision of the states and of the countries where they were in power, where they were and when they are still in power in some cases.
How has the Muslim Brotherhood built its presence and influence across Europe?
Well, Muslim Brotherhood has, again, a very strong influence in some countries more than the others. They are influential where there is a strong link between the political elites in power in some countries, in Turkey through AKP, in Morocco through PGD, or in Hadada throughout Tunisia, and the link amongst these political parties inside the societies in which they're living, with the more or less 5 to 6 million Muslims in France coming, most of them being French citizens, but having roots with both Algeria, Tunisia, and Morocco. This is very obvious. It is very obvious also with the AKPization of the Turkish minority in Germany, where you have 1.5 million Turks working and living in Germany.
Some criticize say the Brotherhood shows a moderate image in public but has different goals behind the scene. Do you agree?
Well, I don't have to agree or disagree. The reality is that political Islam and the Brotherhood, as it was in debate in the French Parliament in January, where there was a resolution calling to bring the Islam Brotherhood on the list of terrorist organizations at the level of Europe. By the way, this was already voted by the European Parliament in July 2025, is very accurate. The influence or the political influence of political Islam, or the influence of political Islam, goes throughout a certain number of canals, which are very well known. Caritative organization, hospitals, school, educational centers, NGOs, association, foundations, or political party. I mentioned the fact, I named a certain number of these parties. In France, for example, we have Union des Organisations Islamiques de France, UOIF, which is clearly linked to the Islam Brotherhood. I mean, it's not hiding it from it. So this is why there is a certain number of awareness, a certain number of preoccupation. The Islam Brotherhood is already on the terrorist list in Germany, in Austria, at the European Parliament, and as well in Great Britain. In France, it is still in debate. A very accurate debate, I should add. 157 voted for, 101 voted against. So it's a very polarized debate, and it goes again throughout the political influence that some of these organizations have amongst the political elites in all of the countries where they are located.
Why are some European governments worried about groups linked to the Muslim Brotherhoods?
Well, because behind Islam Brotherhood, there are states. And there is a political and a state willingness to influence or to carve the political debate. This is very true with Turkey, where you have a sort of collusion between the state collusion between the party, AKP, collusion with the ambition to bring out a certain number of organizations. Janet, the Minister of Religious Affairs, which is influencing, giving a lot of wages and a lot of money throughout Europe in order to influence political choices made by the countries in regards to their bilateral relations, Germany towards Turkey, but also amongst the Turkish, the way that the Turkish minority or the important number of Turks living in Germany, as I said, 1.5 million, can influence the political debate. It was very true and very well assessed when there was a lot of litigation between former German Chancellor Angela Merkel and Recep Tayyip Erdogan. Angela Merkel accusing Recep Tayyip Erdogan to influence or try to influence the votes, the legislative votes when she was in Chancellor. And of course, Recep Tayyip Erdogan saying the same thing on the influence of the Turkish in regards to the last presidential elections in Turkey.
What could be the major danger for the society?
It depends on which society you're talking about.
European society. I'm talking about the European society.
Well, the European society, I will not say, I cannot assess the fact that there is a danger. There is again a preoccupation, or there's a will to better control or better have a capacity to think that that Islam inside Western Occidental society can very be compatible with this Western Occidental society. If you look at the historical roots of what Hassan al-Banna said in 1928, precisely de-occidentalize Islam and put a bridge or a very sharp wall between occidentalization of Egypt as it was going on since the independence of 1923 independence of Egypt, and of course traditional Islam putting an influence on the society. And I would not say there is a danger. I'm not here to say that I'm not advocating for in any direction. There is a willingness to make sure that there is not an influence from outside or a counter foreign influence on the political stability, on the political mindset, or the political willingness, or the political society, the stability inside the countries where Islam Brotherhood is willing to be active, which is, of course, particularly true in the western part of the European continent.
Let's talk about migration and security, Barton, starting with asking you, how much have concerns about political Islam and social issues affected migration politics in Europe?
I would be very cautious about that because I'm not sure there is a link, by the way. First of all, because the instrumentalization or the arsenalization, the weaponization of Islam, the weaponization of migration is not linked with religion. It is linked with the agenda of those who are weaponizing migrants. It can be Turkey in regards to Europe. It can be Libya in regards to Italy. It can be the countries where you have this preoccupation. So it's not based on religion. It's based on national politics or a will to, for example, for Turkey, put pressure on the European Union. It has worked since 2014. From 2014 to 2024, the European Union has given to Turkey 6 billion, or promised to give 6 billion of euros in order to Turkey to take in consideration the migrants. So the weaponization of migrants is not based on religion. It's not, moreover, because the migrants do not come totally from the countries where they are transiting. The migrants in Libya are not Libyans, they are sub-Saharan Africans. The migrants in Turkey are not Turks, they come from Syria. So, of course, and the migrants who have been weaponized in 2023, 2024 in Belarus were not Belarus, they were coming from Afghanistan, they were coming from Syria. So I would be very precautious about the link between Islam and migration, or Islam and the weaponization of migrants.
Has illegal migration helped Islamist group to reach and influence more people? If so, how?
There is a link definitely with all of the terrorists, or all of the criminal organization, and it is obvious that the criminal organization who are dealing or threatening human people in order to win money, gain money, and put pressure on the countries where the migrants are going is an obvious fact. Interpol mentions the fact that the business of smuggling, the business of human smuggling, has allowed this organization to earn 5 billion of euros during the last years. Well, each year during the last year. So there is a criminalization, of course, of migration. It is obvious as well as the terrorist organization, but all of the terrorist organizations, those linked to Al-Qaeda, those linked to Islamic State, have mutual interests, because when you smuggle human beings, you smuggle weapons. When you smuggle weapons, you can smuggle in drugs. And of course, when you smuggle drugs, weapons, and men and women, you gain money in order to fuel your terrorist organization.
If we are talking about challenges and risks, some experts say the Muslim Brotherhood can lead people through more extreme ideas, even violence. Do you agree on that?
Well, this is why, of course, there is, again, this momentum or this awareness amongst European countries, and of course, not only European countries, Canada, United States having the same reflection about radicalization inside Islam, radicalization inside all of the religion, which is not only inside Islam, and of course hampering, or let's say weakening, a certain number of political stability in order, in the perspective of the elections to come. In France in 2027, a few weeks ago in Great Britain, in November in the United States, there is always this risk. We always speak about we call it FIMI, foreign intervention and foreign ingerence. It is known not only linked to states. We have witnessed that, and we have assessed that with Russia, concerning that Russia has meddled or has tried to influence a certain number of votes. Armenia a few weeks ago, Romania in 2025, Moldova at the beginning of this year, maybe Estonia in September. Again, the question of the foreign ingerence is not only Russia, it is also countries who want to influence or counter-influence. Of course, when it comes to France, Turkey is a country for whom we have a lot of preoccupation about the way that it wants to carve or influence the vote as the elections is coming in next year in 2027. Well, the presidential election is coming in 2027.
Okay, then why do some security experts see non-violent Islamist group as a long-term concern?
There is a will to, let's say, be prepared and aware that there could be the use of proxy actors, as they are present not only in a security nexus, but on an influential level. And this is why there is this awareness of France in order to make sure that the political parties in France are not influenced by ideology, philosophy, finality, which is not linked to the political ownership or the sovereignty of the country. The Islamic Brotherhood does not recognize the legitimacy of states. It recognizes the need to have a global Muslim community, regardless of the countries in which the Muslims are living. So it's obvious that groups that may be accepted, that are legitimate on an administrative perspective. I mentioned the Union, I said in fact, Union des Organisations Islamiques de France, which is an organization which is authorized. It is a founder. It is moreover a founder of the French Council on the Muslim Cult. Therefore, it is legal. It is legitimate. That doesn't mean that we must not be aware, or let's say in a preventive manner, of the influence that it can have on the political votes and can influence voters to be less Republican, less democratic, and moreover to be communitarian. The risk is that these political organizations can lead to a communitarization of our society. And in France, we are a Republican nation. We do not recognize differences among the citizens. That is why we are very precautious about the way it can carve and influence the votes to come.
So what can European government do to deal with these challenges while protecting the freedom and social unity?
Well, precisely to make sure that freedom of speech, freedom of thinking, secularity, democratic values, universality of democratic values are defended both in Egypt, both in Yemen, both in every country where there is a radicalization route or the risk of having a radicalization route replace the civil nature of state. This was very true after the revolution, after the Arab Spring. By the way, the momentum of political Islam, saying that democracy must be used in order to take rid or make sure that the democratic will can replace countries in which there was no democracy. Of course, the regime of Ben Ali, the regime of Mubarak, the regime of Bashar al-Assad, the regime of President Rabo in Yemen had criticism. And of course, this is why there was this momentum which the political Islam organization took advantage of. Now we are in another perspective. Let's say we are in a counter-revolutionary perspective. First of all, we are all dealing with common threats, and we need to be more and more correlated or cooperative. Terrorism organization, which can be fueled or can use the ideology of the Muslim Brotherhood. I'm not saying this me, but this is what the members of parliament were asked to agree or disagree during the vote of the International Assembly in January 2026. Therefore, there is a preoccupation, a risk of preoccupation that the ideology of the Muslim Brotherhood may be at the roots of those who commit attacks directly against our political system. Political Islam is abiding or is trying to counter what we are, what the values that we share, and what we are as a society, to bring out a new society or another society. So I'm not here to judge any of the political willingness of each of the organization. As a political analyst, I do understand the preoccupation of some. This is the case with the Republican Party in France. This resolution, which was voted or was proposed by Constance Le Grip, had the will in order to be aware of foreign ingerence throughout Islamization of a certain number of political agenda.
So, final question. Do you expect the Muslim Brotherhood's influence in Europe to grow, decline, or change in the years ahead?
I would definitely say decline and change because they are declining. First of all, I mentioned the fact that we are in a counter-revolution momentum. The powers or the legitimate powers who came in power after the Arab Spring, more or less 15 years after, in Egypt, in Tunisia, today, since December 24, in Syria, again, a bit less in Yemen as the civil war is still fueling, is a new political, must be understood in a new political agenda. There is a need and there is a will from the society, for those who took the floor and went in the revolution in Tahrir Square, in Bourguiba Avenue, to overcome the fate of dislocation. They are willing to be very sovereign and to defend the national identity or the sovereignty of each of the states. And this is a strong commitment. It is a feeling that you have everywhere in the world. It is going stronger and stronger in the Middle East. It is going stronger in Africa. So I think there is a declining role of, let's say, the refuge in religion. The society are less and less influenced by religion. This is true in each religion. There is a sort of a declericization or a secularization of each of our society. In France, we have advanced more than others in Europe, but it is a phenomenon which is, again, growing momentum inside the European Union. By the way, also in Turkey, where you have on one side those who are willing to polarize and to divide by religion, and those who are saying we must get rid of this artificial divide and say that we are Turks and to abide by ideology. You are for or you are against national identity, You are for or you're against the neo-Ottoman mindset or the new imperium which the Recep Tayyip Erdogan is fueling, regardless of religion. So I think this momentum will be a strong argument in order to understand that since the political Islam is declining, since political Islam has lost power almost everywhere, in Tunisia, with the collapse of Ennahda, in Morocco, where the PJD is no longer in power. Maybe the exception, of course, is AKP, but let's see what happens for the next presidential elections in 2028. Maybe the exception would be the Tawazul movement in Mauritania, which is strong and still legitimate and relevant. And of course, in Egypt, where Jama'a Islamiyah is going weaker, and the president's movement or the nationalism sovereign movement under President Al-Sisi is strongly committed to build national unity since 2012 and the collapse of the Morsi regime. So what I'm willing to say is that we are in a new perspective where nationalism, sovereignty, national sovereignty is a strong pillar, and I would say, and I would mention maybe the remède, as we say in French, or the antidote to Islam, political Islam. Political Islam worked on the non-democratization of a certain number of society. Political Islam grew momentum after the collapse of illegitimate regime. Now that you have more legitimate regime, now that you have more democratic perspective, or hoping for democratic perspective in all the countries that I mentioned, political Islam is trying to find another way, another path. And this is why it may be most dangerous, or more dangerous than it was in the previous period, because we knew how it worked. We knew what type of organization it was using. Maybe the next step, and I'm responding directly to your question, may be that we do not know throughout which canal and throughout which leadership and throughout which means and methods it can use or can try to grasp in order to influence political votes. This is why European Parliament has just voted in July 2025 the need to be very cautious of Islamization throughout a certain number of non-state organizations, and to be very, let's say, very harsh or maybe very directive on the values that when you are in a country, you should abide for. In France, when you live in France, you can be Muslim, you can be Jew, you can be Christian, you can be non-believer, but you have to follow the Republican rule that is the ones written in our constitution. If community and if a certain number of organizations do not want to follow that, that is communitarism, and that is anti-Republican, and that should be fought politically speaking, or should be addressed in a legislative way.
Mr. Émanoüel, merci beaucoup. Dear audience, thank you so much, and see you next week.